towards the end of the Lametet Melachot, of the 39 Melachot, Hafsurot Shabbat, that are forbidden in Shabbat. These are the 39 categories of work, and each category has subcategories, Avot, Melacha, and Toladot. And today, one of the two Melachot today, Makeh Patish and Mav'ir, but Mav'ir is a little bit expensive, so I have to split it between today and next week. Next week we'll be done with Mav'ir, Mechabeh, and after that we only have one Melacha left, I believe, and that is Hotza'ah, carrying. After that we'll maybe to spend 1 week or two on various issues that are related to Shabbat, like Amira Le'akum, 1 week is the Goy, instructions and so forth, and after that we're done with the series. So we're almost at the end. Makeh Patish also means at the end. When you're making a keli, when you're forming a vessel, one of the very last steps in forming this vessel is called Makeh Patish. As many times a hammer together with an anvil will be used, la'kot, latet ha'makah achrona, as we say, to finish up the vessel. This is the last stage. Once you do this step, the keli is finished, it's ready, and it's useful, it's shimushi. So this Gemar Melacha, the step of finishing the vessel, is a Melacha. It's considered a Melacha. And anything that is related to it, for example, enhancing, the shaper, and I'm going to give you a lot of examples, improving something, enhancing it, could also be a form of Makeh Patish. Makeh Patish is quite similar to Boneh. Bonim Kelim, we build vessels, and Makeh Patish, we're also finishing a vessel, but Makeh Patish is at the very end, the last stage. So let's start off with a few examples of what Makeh Patish. Imagine you have a kolav, a hanger mitayil, from wire. You know how sometimes we use the hanger or a wire hanger to bend it to make a hook, so we can open up a car, so we can grab something. By taking this wire and shaping it into something that we want, something like a hook, that would be called Makeh Patish. Yeah, we are forming it into something, we're making it into something, and that step that we take, that action, yotzer, creates something which is helpful, something which is good for that wire, mushi, and that is a sur. Now some of these isurim could be midrabanan, but here we're talking about the actual melacha itself. It may not be very fancy, it may not be very complex and involve a lot of work. All you're doing is putting the finish, like we say in English, the finishing touches on this melacha, on this keli, and that would be called the Gemar Melacha, the end, and if that's the end, it could be called Makeh Patish Tasur. Another example that we spoke about in the past is Piru Dapim. Let's say you got a beautiful Sidur Chumash from the printing press, and some pages are stuck at the edges. There are pages that are not completely open, right, that need to be opened up. We can't open those up on Shabbat. If you ever wonder what the reason was, Makeh Patish, because that's the last step in preparing this book to be used, right? So when you cut it up, that's called Makeh Patish. You can't do that on Shabbat. Right? The Afradah here is not chotech, right? It's not a problem of cutting. It's a problem of Makeh Patish. You are completing the Siddur. Now the Siddur is ready. You will see a better example where you will be able to understand this idea better when it comes to clothes. In a Siddur, it's hard to imagine what am I really doing, but that is the last step. That's what the printing press is. After they've printed, after they put it in a kricha, in a cover, in a binding, right? This would be the last step. So this would be a surah on Shabbat to do. Another quick example is any time we are meyasher, we straighten out something which is crooked. Let's say a machat bitachon, a safety pin, or even a regular machat is bent, and we want to straighten it out again. That would be called Makeh Patish. That we cannot do on Shabbat, because that bending, that straightening, causes this machat to be useful for whatever it was intended to. And that would make it, Makeh Patish would make it a surah. Yeah. I'll talk about that later. Yeah, that's different. No, it's different. If it's stuck because of food, it's different. So totally different. And I've mentioned that in the past, but I'm going to repeat it again. So the concept behind Makeh Patish is either the Gemar Melacha or the Shipur or the enhancement. Or another idea that is in Aramaic is Tikkun Mana. Tikkun Mana means fixing a keli. In other words, putting it into a status or condition where it is useful and it may not have been before. So an example of Tikkun Mana, of fixing something, you're not necessarily repairing something, but you're putting something back to what it was so it could be used again, so it could perform its function. A good example of that would be, for those who wear glasses, I'm sure it has happened to you more than once, that the lens fell out, the glass fell out, and you want to put it back into the frame. Putting that chuchit, that adasha, back into the misgeret, into the frame, would be called Makeh Patish. Because now it is able to do what it was intended to do. It's a surah on Shabbat. Same thing would be if your frame of the glasses is bent, just like the machat. You can't unbend or straighten that frame, Makeh Patish. That's the last step before whatever it is that you have becomes ready to be used, and it can be used once you've done that. So there are situations where it's difficult, where if what is involved is a melacha deoraita, if what is involved will be something forbidden by the Torah, then you can't even ask a goy to do it. Sometimes if it's the Rabbanan, depending on what the problem is, you may be able in certain circumstances to have the assistance of a goy. So it all depends what's involved. So there are ways that you can work around it. You still have one glass left, right? You could use it. Yeah. Yes, you can use it. Yeah, without the frame. Sure. So there are ways around it, but it can become a problem because just to put it back would be a tool. No, because it's useful. It's something that you could use. You never intended. What Smoke says, we will talk about later on. That's one of the things that we will be talking about. That is not one of the lametet melachot, nevertheless it's forbidden on Shabbat. Something which you put your mind aside from it. You don't intend to use it on Shabbat. You intend to use it. And this item is useful one way or another, even though it's not in its original place. Okay, another example that is similar to the opening the pages is tichat kif tafur. Sometimes when you buy a suit, the pockets are still tied. This ones are still tied. I don't know why they tie them. They were meant to be used. Do you know why they tie them? It keeps it straight.
Well, you have a puffy jacket.
You probably work with textiles. No. Huh? You don't carry anything. It looks nice, right? But in reality, the keys, the pocket is intended to be used. So once you can't open it up on Shabbat because that would be the gemar melacha, the finished product. That would be makeh b'patish. Or another interesting example is creating something from something that exists, but you are perfecting it to be used for your needs. For example, taking a piece of raw wood from a tree, a bark, or whatever, and shaping it or cutting it to a certain size so you can use it as a toothpick. So that piece of wood that was just wood before has become a toothpick. That will be called makeh b'patish. Some of these things, by the way, might be called boneh. They're similar sometimes. Either way, it would be a sur min Torah to make it. There is one area where, even though it's not necessarily the end, the gemar melacha, you still may do some little touch-ups to it. The process of it is called makeh b'patish, and that is glass blowing. The ta'alich of the yisura zkuchit, glass blowing, where you take hot glass, which is basically from the oven, sand, all the other ingredients they put to make glass. They take like a pipe, they stick it in, they take out the glob, and then they blow, they shape a bottle or whatever it is from glass. That's how they make it. So this whole ta'alich, this whole process is called makeh b'patish. You're giving this a form, you're making it, and it's pretty much, even though it's not at the very end, you still may eventually add some little things to it. You may do some additional things to this glass, but for the most part, this would be called makeh b'patish. It would be a suit on Shabbat. A lot of these examples, of course, people are not going to do on Shabbat, because nobody's going to make glass on Shabbat. It involves fire, it involves other problems too. But just to give you an idea of what this involves, there's quite a few examples. Some of them you would never think of, but they are prohibited on Shabbat. And the following is a good example of what most people are unaware of. This is an example which is hard to understand unless you're a physicist or a chemist. Let's say you have a boiling hot pot. A boiling hot pot that just came out of the oven or on top of the stove. Somehow it's boiling hot. You cannot pour cold water onto it. You know how sometimes you want to put a hot pot inside the sink that's full of water to cool down? You have to be careful not to do that on Shabbat. On Shabbat you have to be careful not to take a hot pot and put it into cold water or pour cold water onto it, because that step of pouring cold water on a very hot metal is makeh b'patish, because that combination of hot and cold supposedly strengthens the mechazek et hakeli. Somehow, we can't see it. No, just for metal. Just for metal, as far as I know. There's a shinui. Something happens, and this is a form of at least, or at least domeh, le makeh b'patish, because that's what they would do if they would want to, after they form this keli in the oven somehow, this metal, they would want to strengthen it, they would want to finish it. This would be the final finishing touches on the keli. So pouring cold water on a hot keli is a surah. Alright, now we're going to something, actually, just quickly, the difference between boneh and makeh b'patish, for those of you who just came. They're very similar, but makeh b'patish is usually towards the end. You're also forming something, but you're doing something that completes the formation of this keli, whereas boneh could usually be in the very early stages. When you're putting something together, mihalakim, from parts, you're assembling, you already transgressed the boneh. Boneh can happen in the early stages. Makeh b'patish only happens at the very end. Boneh usually happens with hard items, and it usually happens on the ground. You build something. That's usually boneh, the typical boneh. Makeh b'patish could be even with soft items, right? and it doesn't necessarily happen in the ground. So they may be similar, but the main difference is that Makeh Patish is at the very end. It's the finishing touches. And because it's the finishing touch, it's one of the melachot. Alright, now we got into a very interesting example. Something that got ruined. It's in disrepair. It's not functioning correctly. Something is wrong with it. It may be mutar to fix it back to the way it was, or it may be it all depends on what you need to do to repair this. Let me give you an example. A hat that got smashed. You had your hat in Shabbat, you come to Knesset, you put it down, and somebody sat down on it. It happened. It's all squished. Is that a real word? Is that a slang? Yeah? Whatever. It's smashed up, right? You don't want to wear it. You want to put it back to the way it was. You want to straighten it out. That's not called Makeh Patish. Because even though you're forming it and you get shape and you're putting it back to the way it was, that's not called Makeh Patish. You're not really doing something to it that was not there before. And what you're doing is not in itself a melacha. The only thing that you're doing is putting it back to the way it was. So since it's not any other melacha, it's also not Makeh Patish because it was there before. Take, for example, another example. This is the first time that you're going to fill your kariyot, your pillows. How do you call the pillow cover? Pillowcase. This is a new pillowcase that was just sewn. Let's go back 100 years when everything was done by hand. Your wife or your grandmother or whatever just sewed you a beautiful pillowcase. And what are you going to fill it with? What did they fill it back then, 100 years ago? The feathers. And which one were the most expensive feathers? The goose feathers. And they were the softest, supposedly. I think they still use it today. Yeah? Expensive? Yeah? Yeah. Okay. Anyway, you can't do that for the first time on Shabbat. You can't take that pillowcase and start filling it up with feathers. That's Makeh Patish. That's a good example of Makeh Patish that you would never think of. Because what am I doing? I'm just putting feathers, which was not muktzah because I prepared it for on Shabbat. So I did not, I planned to use it. It's hard work. Work, you mean? Yeah, it could be. That a lot of these things could be hard work too. But hard work is not asur on Shabbat according to the Torah. It's only asur because you're not resting on Shabbat. You shouldn't be working hard. For example, you see the table? It's very heavy. You're allowed to take it across the room here. Even though it's heavy and you'll sweat. But you can't carry a handkerchief outside, even though it's so light, because of the melacha of hotza'ah. So that's one of the things that we'll be discussing when we talk about the concepts of the melacha and Shabbat at the very, very end. What did the Torah prohibit here exactly? Not avodah, but melacha. Avodah meaning labor. It was not exactly prohibited. It was certain melachot, certain categories of work, that by doing them, hem mevatlim otanu, from the spirit of Shabbat, they take away the spirit of Shabbat, and they make the day look like a regular day of the week, where one creates and performs and works. So these categories of work, even though they may not be so difficult and so laborious, by performing them, they make us forget that this is a special day. So the picking up a heavy table may not make us forget, but hotza'ah, putting on a flame, Makeh Patish, boneh, all these things will make us forget and treat this day as an ordinary day. So the Torah prohibited certain types of melachot that defeat the whole purpose of Shabbat, of being a day of rest, being a spiritual day. It's a form of shipur, but because it was there before, there was a shape of a hat there before. What? Yeah. Very good question. You heard the question? Okay. He asked a very good question. With a pair of glasses, when the lens fell out, it was there before too. The problem is, with certain items, that's the kilkul ha'asur. The gam kilkul, it got ruined, but that kilkul is asur. Why? Because when the glass fell out, it's no longer shimushi at all. It lost its complete status of glasses. Why? Right, it's completely useless for what it is. The glass is no longer, it's like it's no longer glasses. Why? The needle is asur to straight. What? Now, even though you're right, but the way it is right now, it's useless. It has lost its complete usefulness. It has not exactly. Yeah. It's very, very small difference. Very small difference, but the main thing that you need to remember is that if it lost its complete mahut, its complete essence, what? No, mahad bitachon, for example, a safety pin. Yeah, I gave it an example of any mahad because it could easily become bent, or the frame of the glasses. It lost its complete usefulness, and that's why that form of kilkul, I'm recreating. It's like I'm recreating it from scratch. I'm making it again. If it's still there, but it just needs a little bit straightened out, like the hat, I mean, it didn't really lose anything. It just doesn't look nice, that's all. It didn't really lose its status, usefulness. I can still put it on. It's going to look funny, right? But it's, Yeah. Right. Of course, unless you have a real need. You're having a sheva berachot in the Bet HaKnesset, you want to take the table there. Otherwise, you don't want to do hard labor on Shabbat either.
Is that a 400?
Yes. Even if it's on Melacha. There's a lot of things we can't do only because it's a lot of work. And it's not asur midoraita, but it's asur midorabanan. Another example of something that would be mutar on Shabbat to do, that is kilkul, is, remember the example of opening the pages that were stuck at the printing press? What if they were stuck because of some food got in? That is okay for me to open it up, because I didn't really create something new. The pages were okay there, just some food got in there, so I'm removing the food so that it should not glue the pages together. That would be a kilkul, that's mutar as well. Let me see if there was another example. Yeah, we gave the example of the pillowcases. So with the pillowcases, let's say I'm taking out the stuffing for some reason, it came out, I'm taking it out, I can put it back in. It's not the first time. It's not a makeh patish the first time I'm preparing it. If it was there before and I'm just putting it back in the case of a pillowcase, it would be alright. Alright, people ask me this question from time to time. The next example, kivuna sha'on. We'll be talking about the whole idea of using watches on Shabbat. Can you carry them? Can you use them? There can be several problems with watches. But the one we're interested right now is only the kivun, setting the time. Some rabbis are of the opinion that setting the time on a watch is called makeh patish. We're not as strict. We allow setting the time. In other words, the custom, most people. No, it has nothing to do with the Bet Yosef. He didn't have a watch in those days, so it could be the Bet Yosef. Sometimes. The kivun hasha'on of today, as long as it's not battery, digital, right, obviously you can. A regular watch like this, if you need to, we're more lenient. That's a whole different issue. That's the issue of piltul. Is that called carrying or not? Right? I don't wear a watch on Shabbat. No, it's not a minhag, it's a halakha. But there are some who are lenient. Yeah, especially, okay, if you want to know already now, in case you're not going to be here next week, with a watch, if it's a tachshit, if it's a piece of jewelry, if it's gold, and not 8 carats, but it's a piece of jewelry, you would even wear it. And this is basically true for women, not much more than for men. Women, would you wear a watch that's gold, even if it's not working? Right? Even if it's not working, because that's the test. Would you wear the watch even if it's not working? Then you treat it as a piece of jewelry. Treat it as a piece of jewelry. You can wear jewelry. It's not piltul. See, with men it's a little bit different. They mostly wear the watch to tell the time. But if they have a Rolex, they may not care if it's working or not. They want to show it off. Same thing. If it's a piece of jewelry that you would wear, even if it's not working, then for sure there's no problem in wearing it. The problem is when it's not a piece of jewelry. Can you wear or not? So when we talk about hosa'ah, I'll get into the problems of why there are different opinions, whether this is called carrying or not. But I just gave you a little bit of an overview that many do not wear unless it's a piece of jewelry, and some are more lenient and they allow themselves to wear a watch. So that's in hosa'ah. Right now we're talking about setting the time. We are lenient as far as setting the time. If it's not a digital watch, it's not a problem. But some say it's makeh patish, because if you're setting it up, it means silver is a piece of jewelry too. There are certain leniency, especially if it's a piece of jewelry. If it's not, or if it's digital, you can't wear it. Those watches that have calculators, you should not wear them. Muktzah. And you might touch it. Muktzah because you might touch it and because of all these batteries and all the digital in it. There are various problems with it. Alright, the same thing I wrote here, achlafat batariyot, changing of batteries. Once you put batteries into something, even though you don't plan to use it, we will talk about that later, still placing the batteries may be called makeh patish, because now this product, this machine is ready. Just an example of batteries are anyways muktzah on Shabbat. But no, the battery itself, not the watch, the battery itself.
One piece about
well, remember there's several issues. There's the issue of carrying and the issue of you may come to touch it. It's muktzah or not because of that. You come to use it. Just take it off. You're allowed to take it off, sure. You can take it off with a shinui. Open up this and let it fall somewhere. That would be better. Alright, other examples of makeh patish. Oiling. You know how we like to oil certain things so that we shouldn't hear them screech? The oiling of metal parts, shakechim, in other words, that they rub, is also a form of makeh patish, and that would be a sutu on Shabbat. So you might think, what am I doing? I'm just pouring a little bit of oil. It makes no difference if you use mazola, if you use motor oil, whatever. That oil on the metal is a form of makeh patish, and that would be a suit as well. We spoke about the next example, asarat haluda. If you have some rust on the metal, there was an opinion that says that if you remove the rust, you are transgressing memahek. Memahek is one of the melachot, of rubbing off this rust. And others say it belongs with makeh patish. Either way, it's asur, to remove rust from something on Shabbat. Rust, R-U-S-T, not rust, dust. Dust is not a problem. Rust is, yeah? No, not lick, the shamin, yeah. No, that's different. That's a question, and we spoke about that last week. Are you allowed to unclog your sink, a plunger? No problem. Yeah, so some say you should not use Drano, like that. No, not because of that, because of what's involved. But if it's a small If it's a small stoppage, the clog is not too big, just use a plunger. The plunger is the best way to unclog in the toilet or the sink. But we spoke about the drain, the piping. There's a lot of, what do you call it, the outside? The gutter. That could be more complex. It can involve more work. That it should not be done. So removing the rust is a sur. And again, we mentioned the pichat bakbukim. We spoke about pichat bakbukim and pafiyot, the opening of cans and bottles several times. But there are quite a few shitot, opinions in this, and you will find people, Jews on Shabbat, who will not open soda cans, who will not open bottles on Shabbat. Everybody agrees that it's better to open that before Shabbat. You avoid problems. But we, especially the Sephardim, are more lenient with opening a bottle. What's the problem with opening a bottle? Some say that you're forming a keli. It's a form of makere patish, or it's a form of boneh, the cap is a keli. Or you open up olives or cucumbers, pickles. Some say you're making a keli. However, the other opinion says that keli has already been made before at the manufacturer, at the factory. It just seals it back and you open it. So there are various opinions, and what we do, when we do open it, at least we empty the content into another keli, then we throw it out. By this, we're basically proving that we don't intend to use it. It's not a keli. It was intended to be thrown out. The chat pami, used once, and that's it. Or what other people do is they puncture a hole from the bottom, then that keli is not usable anymore. So that would be another example which may fall under the category of makebe patish, who creates something to form something, but we hold that it's already formed. Yeah, wine is an example. By opening up, by removing the cork is not a problem. Removing the wrapper could be a problem with the letters. You have to be careful as much as possible not to touch the letters. But then you have the cap. With the cap, there's two issues. There is the forming of the keli, which some say is the keli, we say no. And then there is the ring that's left over. You know the ring that's left over? Once you've opened the keli, you have to be careful not to remove the ring, not to pull away all the pieces, because that could be a makebe patish, because you are perfecting everything. You are removing something which doesn't have to be. The bottle is already open. But the ring that's left over, just leave it alone. All right, there is an opinion that says that if you just have shoes for the first time, you've not put for the first time shoelaces. Remember the example with pillowcases? Shoelaces too. Once you insert the shoelaces for the first time, that might be okay if it's already partially, it's already in there. Yeah. Now, if you remove that, you can put it back in, or if it tore, you can put it back in. But for the first time, it's brought down that one should not do it. All right. Here's a very interesting situation that I just learned a couple weeks ago from my wife. I'm learning things every week. They don't teach you these things before you get married. What does a woman do if she needs to go out and all of a sudden she notices that her stockings are torn? Don't tell me. I want to see the men now. Besides changing, switching.
Nail polish.
Oh, your mother told you probably, huh? They use nail polish. Did you ever hear that? Lacquer. They put on the, and it works. Yeah. It seals. No, it doesn't seal the hole. It basically makes sure that the run does not run further. Huh? The Shabbat is asur, makebe patish. Yeah. You change your stockings. Yeah, what can you do? And the following day you go to Ross and you buy stuff and you. So that's shibush belaka, asur on Shabbat. That's makebe patish. Another example of makebe patish that you may not have thought of is filling up a balloon or a ball with air. When it's flat, it's useless. It has no purpose. So we don't fill it up on Shabbat. Now, a balloon has a second problem. Anybody know what the second problem of a balloon is? What? No. To fill it up with air. Yeah, a balloon you have to tie. You can't tie on Shabbat. And not that is a permanent knot, right? So with the balloon you have this additional problem. So not if you're going to tie it and make it something and just blow a little bit. No. That's nothing. It has to be filled up. To fill a ball or a balloon is asura because of makebe patish. What about a paper? Yeah, you shouldn't make any form of things like that on Shabbat. It's also brought down. It may not be an isud doraita because it's not something permanent. By taking paper and folding it, but the custom is not to make it on Shabbat because it resembles the real thing. All right, yeah. Playing ball is a whole different area. We'll talk about that when we get to muktzah. No, we'll talk about it. That's an area that there's no melacha involved. So we'll talk about it at the very, very end after we're finished with the melachot. What the issue? There's no real melacha. There's no real problem as far as the Torah is concerned. But there are other issues. Okay, the next example is gumiyot. The gumiyot that I'm talking about, little rubber caps, are the ones that sometimes we put underneath tables and chairs so that the table and chair should not scratch the floor, the hardwood floor. So those caps that you put may be also a form of makebe patish because that's the finishing touch after the table or the chair is made. That when you put that underneath, some may argue perhaps that it's not. It all depends if you take it off or you take it on. But usually we put it and we leave it there. Since we leave it there, it's better not to do that on Shabbat. for the first time. If it fell, it might be okay to put it back on. Alright, the other item I already mentioned before is removing the ring that's left over from the bottle, from the cap. Just leave it there. But best not to remove it. These are all examples of situations where one may be transgressing Makeh Patish Midoraita. The following will be examples of Midrabanan. Now pay attention here because this can become a little bit tricky because there's some differences between Sephardim and Ashkenazim. The rabbis prohibited playing music on Shabbat. Taking your guitar, right, piano, hashma'at kol. Any time we're making music, regardless of the instrument you're using, even if you use a hammer, to make all sorts of, not only a hammer, even if you use your hands to use, and you use your table as a drum, it's a sur. Now, wait a minute, I didn't finish. Yes. Why did they say so? Because they said, you may come, if you play music on Shabbat, you may come to repair your instrument that has become defective for whatever reason. No, 1 second. So therefore, because you may come to repair, and that repair will be Makeh Patish, that form of repair, they said, no music in any form, even if you use your hand, even if you clap, okay? And no dancing. No, let me first, I'll finish and then I'll explain. First let me say the halakha, and then I'll tell you what the custom is, and what the difference between Sephardim and Ashkenazim. So they made the rule that no music on Shabbat, including clapping, banging your hands on the table, dancing, unless it's Simchat Torah. Why? Only because of this gezerah, Shema Yavo Letaken. Maybe you might come to fix, and that will be a Makeh Patish. So because you may come to do Makeh Patish, you cannot play your instruments or anything similar to it that's called Hashma'at Kol. Now when we're talking about Hashma'at Kol, I said it also includes anything, even taking a hammer, right? Even though the hammer does not make music, if you're doing it to a rhythm and you're making musical sounds, even though you're using something that is not intended for music, it's a surah. However, it's mutar if you are, for example, you take a screwdriver that, or something else that usually is not intended for music, to make musical sound, and you bang on the door so people should hear you, and that's mutar. What you cannot do is use the regular door, what do you call it? The doorknob, right, on Shabbat. Because that doorknob makes a certain sound, it's intended to make a certain Shabbat. So we don't use doorknobs on Shabbat, but if you want to have the people listen to you inside, you're allowed to use something else that is not intended to make music, like hammer, screwdriver, right? Or knock with your hand, yeah? Those things that are part of the door, yeah, that are used to make a certain sound. Yeah.
Isn't there a mother?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that. I just wanted to give you the background of what's going on over here, right? And they said that certain types of sounds are mutar and certain types of sound are sur. The basic difference is that if it's not intended, if it's not used to make music, and you're not making music, it's mutar. But if it's something that can make music, even though what you're using usually is not used for music, it would be a sur. Now, the Mechaber, the Bet Yosef, Rabbi Yosef kind of brings down this halakha and makes no exception. Even though we have an exception for Simchat Torah for Rikudim, we do dance for Simchat Torah for Tzivah, right? The Mechaber, the Bet Yosef, does not make an exception as far as clapping. Clapping or using your fingers in any way or drumming on the table. The Mechaber makes no exception, and he leaves it the way it is, and that's what the Sephardim follow. Ashkenazim in this area are lenient. They said the minhag of the olam, the custom of the world, is that regular clapping was not included in the original gezerah, and neither was just banging on the table when you're singing. Yeah? Was not included, exactly. But dancing we avoid unless it's, of course, a dance of a mitzvah. But just doing a little bit, especially clapping, on the table might be more problematic, banging on the table, if you're doing it in a rhythm. But the Ashkenazim are much more lenient in general on clapping and even banging, because they said the following: that was not included, and the reason why it was not really included or intended in the prohibition, because we don't suspect that mizeh yavo lezeh, right? That from clapping you're going to come to fix and repair your guitar. See what I mean? But chimes or anything that it sounds like music, right? That already everybody would agree and understand that this may lead to that because it's related. But clapping and banging on the table, what does that have to do with repairing your guitar? So Ashkenazim are lenient with this. Hasidim are Ashkenazim, yeah.
How does
Yeah, banging or clapping. Yeah.
somebody say clapping as well?
Sipuk, hayadayim is the clapping, and metapchim is the other one, the banging, yeah. Because we're talking about makeh patish, so the Chachamim gazru kol minei gzerot, they decreed, shema yavo letaken et hakeli shelo, anything that has to do with music. Right? Halakha said anything that has to do with music, right? That's why the Ashkenazim say that the whole original Gezerah did not necessarily encompass everything, because Like you said, from this to this is a very far distance. So they're more lenient. But the Mechaber says, no, we don't find any exemption, halakha, in the original makor of the halakha. They included everything, and they meant everything. So that's basically the halakha, the minhag. So if it's Simchat Torah, of course, we're more lenient. No, we don't clap. That's, first of all, that clapping is not really a Jewish custom. Applause. It's not a Jewish custom. We say Chazak u'Baruch. We kiss the boy. We embrace him. We don't applause. Applause is for people who are cold and indifferent and couldn't care less. No, that's the way I see it. Applause is very, very not sentimental. Right? It doesn't mean anything. So it can't be Jewish. The Jewish people are warmer than him. They throw candies at him, right? Chazak u'Baruch. They pick him up. Just go to a Jewish wedding and look at a Goyish wedding. A non-Jewish wedding looks like, it's like a church. Yeah, I do and I do. Yeah. Is that what they say? Right? Anyway, so it's that's the basic background behind this prohibition that is midrabanan. So if you're not overdoing something, you're just banging a little bit, it's okay. But to bang according to a rhythm to make certain sound, according to the Sephardic tradition. Okay, so what do you do if the door has bells? You can't, because bells is bells, right? It's a musical sound, and right. If there's no way for you to enter the house, obviously you could enter. But if you can use another door, you need to use another door. You would not be able to use a door that when you open it makes all sorts of sounds and chimes, things like that. You know those chimes you hang that make sounds in the wind? So if by your action they would make a sound, you would not be able to do it on Shabbat. Oh, that's something else, obviously. But when you're aware of it, you have to avoid it. Shofar. You can use the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. It's a mitzvah, right? To blow the shofar. But that's only when it's the mitzvah to blow. Once you're done with the tefillah, with the prayer, after the prayer, you shouldn't just blow for fun. Children can use the shofar if they want to practice. But adults, after they're done with the mitzvah, they should shofar. For similar reasons. Adults, they should prepare before Rosh Hashanah. Okay, the last three examples of this melacha are as follows. Very important example. When you buy a keli from a goy, it's made out of metal or glass, it requires tevilah. You take it to the mikveh. What? No, of course. From a store. You go to the store, this keli was manufactured by a goy. You buy it, it's new. It doesn't need hag'ala or hechsher. He never used it for tarif. Because if he did use it for tarif, it would require hag'ala too. He would have to make it kasher. So depending on what material it's from, if it's the different types of metals like tin and lead and copper and gold and so forth, it would require tevilah. La'alot ota me'atumah la'tusha. To sanctify it, to remove it from the reshut ha'tumah to the reshut ha'tusha. And that is a very important halakha. The thing is, you can't do that on Shabbat because it's like makeh bepatish. The tevilah is making it ready to be used. So this poses a problem. What happens if you did not take it to tevilah and you have to eat and you have to put food on the slate, on the spot? What do you do? In this area, there's also a difference between Sephardim. But in this one, the Sephardim are the ones who are lenient. The Sephardim says it's okay to do it on Shabbat too. Everybody agrees that you need to do it before Shabbat, and everybody agrees that you should not make it on Shabbat, even if you did not do it before Shabbat. The difference is as follows. There is a solution brought down in the halakha, which is not the last resort solution. That in case you do not take it to the mikveh before Shabbat, give it as a gift to a goy. Since you're giving it to the maid or to the goy as a gift, it's no longer yours. You can borrow it. It's his. You're allowed to do that, and that's the first solution. If you need to use the keli on Shabbat for something. If you couldn't do that, the mechaber says no problem. Just go ahead and put it into the mikveh. Ashkenazim say no way. First thing you have to find a goy, give it away to him as a gift. Now, if there was no goy whatsoever, you can't take it into the mikveh. If you, for some reason, are desperate to this keli, and if it's a keli that you can fill it up with water, like cups, so make believe you're filling it up. Instead of just dumping it in there, make believe you're filling it up, so that's a form of shinui. It doesn't give the appearance anymore that you tevilah, and then it's fine. Or, if it's forks and spoons that you cannot fill it up with water, and you have no choice, you just need it. You have no chopsticks, right? And you don't want to eat with your hands, right? You want the forks and spoons, and you have no choice. As a last resort, if you're desperate, the Ashkenazim say it's okay. But the Sephardim say don't worry about it. If you did not find a goy to give it to him as a gift, go ahead, go to the mikveh on Shabbat. This is not assuming the right time. It's only that the Chachamim said it appears. It looks like tikkun mana, fixing a keli. It looks like makeh bepatish, and therefore it's assumed to do on Shabbat. Do it before Shabbat. And the same thing is with the following, afrashat challah. Right? If you bake a certain amount, use a certain amount of flour to make bread, there's a mitzvah removing challah. Even though today's mitzvah is different than the mitzvah that we had during the time that Am Yisrael was in Eretz Yisrael, we had a Bet HaMikdash. Nevertheless, it's still a mitzvah, at least midrabanan. And there's a difference between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. If one did not remove challah before Shabbat, and he is in Israel right now, there's almost no way possible for him to eat that challah on Shabbat. In Chutz La'aretz, because it's a drop more lenient, the whole mitzvah of challah in Chutz La'aretz, what you can do is, eat from the challah, and just make sure you leave over a little bit. And after Shabbat, from that little bit that you left over, you remove it kazai to challah, which you will burn, by the way, right? That's the way the mitzvah is performed. You remove a little bit. Usually the mitzvah is when you're making the dough. But the di'avad, if you forgot, so you couldn't do it when it was a dough, you can always do it after it was baked. You take a little piece, you make the beracha, and you burn it. You completely burn that little piece. And that you do after Shabbat in this case. So in Eretz Yisrael, you can't do that unless there is a way you were always used to, before Shabbat, having in mind that in case I forget, I will do it on Shabbat. In other words, you can prepare yourself mentally before Shabbat to do so later. But otherwise, in Israel, this would be a lot more problematic. If in case you baked a certain amount and you forgot to take it, it would be more of a problem. Usually, we don't have this problem because we don't bake that much. Usually, in order for you to be required to take challah with the beracha, it would be 5 pounds. 5 pounds. 2.2 kilos, 2.25, 2.3. Make sure there's a good ashgacha. You see, ufreshu challah, ufresh challah, trumot u'ma'asrot, the truma ma'aseh was removed. Lelo chashash tolaim v'shvi'it, but there's no problem here of worms or that there was a problem working on Shemitah year. In Israel, there's a lot of things to check other than just the kosher ingredient. Okay, the last few examples is swimming. We don't swim on Shabbat, even though there's a difference between Sephardim and Ashkenazim as far as taking cold showers. We discussed in the past. Sephardim are more lenient with cold showers. Taking a dip is not a problem for Sephardim. Taking a cold shower if you're very sweaty, only if you're very sweaty. Otherwise, you shouldn't even take a shower, even a cold shower, unless you go to the mikveh every day. Ashkenazim don't take any showers, cold or hot, unless they go to the mikveh. Then that's mutar too. But swimming, everybody prohibits swimming, especially in a river, lake, or the ocean. What? It's prohibited. Swimming. Swimming is not a dip. Swimming is prohibited. Why? Shema yavo letaken. Maybe you will come to repair your raft. In the olden days, when people were taught how to swim, they used a sort of raft to help them. Like a lifesaver. And because that used to require repairs from time to time, because it was made from simple materials, the Chachamim chasheshu that you might come to repair it on Shabbat. And that would be a form of tikkun now from Kebet Patish. And said, you know what, no swimming. Unless it's for a quick dip if you're a Sephardi. Yeah, then it's not a problem. So on Shabbat, no swimming. If you go every day. Or if it's for the woman, if that's the time for it. Last two examples, quick examples, you can't sharpen knives on Shabbat. That's the form of Makebet Patish. And neither can you fold your talit or your clothes on exactly the same spot where it was folded before. Some say that's called melaben, some say it's called a patish, because you are perfecting it by removing any wrinkles or straightening it out and being makpid to put it on the exact same spot where it was before. So on Shabbat, when you see people fold the talit, they just do it like that. Motzei Shabbat, when they come home, the custom is to take that talit and fold it nicely. On this, there's no leniency. That's the custom, where everybody does that. You don't fold it exactly on the exact spot where the wrinkles are. For anything. Even if the lines are already, you don't fold it exactly. You know what? Talit even during the week. Yeah, every day. Besides this. Okay, we'll spend just a few minutes at the beginning of Mav'ir. Mav'ir is a big melacha, tremendous big melacha with a lot of details. And if you come next week, there's a lot of interesting details that applies to automobiles and cars. What happens if you get stuck somewhere? Can you take a taxi home? That has to do with this melacha. That will leave for next week. Now we'll cover the basics of Mav'ir. Mav'ir means to put something on fire, or to light the fire, or to increase the fire, whether you're adding oil or you're raising the knob. So I wrote over here, Mav'ir includes hava'ara, the actual combustion of the material, should be misrof mashu, to burn something, or it includes the hatzata, the actual lighting the fire with matches, or the hosafat shemen, la medura, adding oil, increasing the flame, lighting the flame, or burning something. That's called Mav'ir. Shabbat only. We're talking about Shabbat right here. It's one of the melachot in Shabbat. Nachon? The asur ladlik esh. You cannot put on a flame. And this flame is whether you use matches to put it on, whether you are burning something in the flame, right? Or whether you're adding oil or turning up the knob to increase the flame of Shabbat. Either one of this is called hav'ara or mav'ir. And this melacha is, of course, the Sunnah Shabbat. This is, of course, something that many people are familiar with. Everybody knows they can't make fire or burn something on Shabbat or cook on Shabbat only because of this. But they don't realize that it could be any one of those three. Even if you did not turn it on, but you're adding something or you're cooking something on it, it will be a Sunnah Shabbat. There's a machloket between the Rambam and others as to what is the din of putting metal into fire. When you put metal into fire and the metal becomes red hot, are you cooking the metal? Is it called mevashel or is it called mav'ir? So most say that it's under mevashel, but the Rambam, I'm sorry, one of them says it's under mevashel, and one of them says, I think the Rambam says, yes, because that's a material that is combustible in a sense, get on fire, it won't necessarily melt right away, but it would be under this melacha, and it would be asur. So it's regardless of which one it is, it's asur, whether it's a mashal or whether it's mam'ir. And this is a very important point to keep in mind, because we're going to have to interpret and decide what's the halacha and what's the status of electricity in Shabbat. And electricity is going to make a big difference whether we're talking about the current in the wall, the zerem, the chashmal, or we're talking about the actual filament in a light bulb. Because the filament in a light bulb is different than the current flowing. Heat may be involved in both places, but one is a filament that is burning like the Rambam says on a metal, with the metal on the flame, and one is just the current, a power that is being produced somehow, which is being discussed in the past number of years that it has come up, this technology. What is the status? What is it? How do we describe it? Is it a asur b'doraisa? Is it a asur b'drabanan? Everybody agrees it's a asur, but what is it? So that's the question of Hashmal. There are three basic definitions. One says it falls under the category of maf'ir. One says that it's like boneh, like you're actually building something, you're actually making something by using electricity. You're putting current into something and you are making it work, and you are making it into something, shaping it into something. And one that says that it's molid. Those who say that it's molid is midrabanan. What that means is giving birth to something. That's the literal translation. Giving birth to something means introducing something into the world that was not here before. Right, but it's bringing something in. A typical example of molid is putting perfume on clothes. You cannot do that. You can put perfume on yourself and your body, but as we will see when we talk about nolad, this problem of nolad is rabbanan, that you cannot put it on your clothes, just sprinkle. You can spray yourself, you use deodorant. On your body you can do it, but you cannot put it on the clothes. There's a problem of nolad. And here too, a molid, by bringing something into the world that was not there before, did not exist, introducing it, that is a surah of Rabbanan. Well, it will make a big difference if something is Rabbanan or Midoraita, because one of the differences is, can you use a goy? In some situations, let's say it's very hot. Can you ask them to turn on the air conditioner, which is electrical, right? Well, and there's current involved. There's no filament, or is there? So you have to know all these halachot, all these concepts, to determine if something is Asur Rabbanan or Midoraita, and can I use a goy, and how to work around it. Yeah, I'm getting to that. Yeah. But what? No, we spoke about that before, that one should not use gel on his hair and Shabbat, for other reasons. Okay, the typical examples of electrical appliances that are Asur on Shabbat is the use of a telephone, the use of a microphone, the use of an intercom, the use of an electrical bell, a ringer, and any digital appliances that have lights go on and off. Now what happens if you are sleeping, it's 2:30 in the morning, Shabbat, and the telephone is ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing. Now you know it's not some telemarketing company from the East Coast trying to sell you soap or a vacation somewhere, or why don't you consolidate your debts? We have a very low interest rate. Not at that hour in the morning, right? It could be an emergency. So if you suspect, only if you suspect. If you don't suspect, then don't pick it up. But if you suspect, strongly suspect, you know that people may do that, then throw the receiver down, pick it up, and here, who it is. Yeah. If you strongly suspect that it could be an emergency, sure. Especially if you had an answering machine and you hear the voice, then you for sure to pick up. Right, but if you have no answering machine and you don't have a ID or caller ID, yeah, you don't have it, you don't know who it is. If you see the caller, you see your parents. You see your mother-in-law, maybe not, but if you see right? But if you see that it's important, right? You can, by shinui, you can pick it, you can throw it down and pick it up. So that's the mikre herum. That's if it's in an emergency situation.